right, June 1st, 2018. If you're just tuning into my channel, my company is What the Fungus. We're a seasonal mushroom farm here in British Columbia. We're right now in the midst of, it would be our fourth expansion in the history of What the Fungus, and we have some challenges, but we also have a lot of good stuff to talk about. I'm going to get into all the details on this video. And a few videos ago I promised I'd give away 4 of our best strains, and I had to just pick a random comment. I read them all, was really inspired by what everyone had to say in that video. Leave a link up there if you haven't seen it. But I'm going to give 4 cultures to Jamie Wilcox out of Florida. So send me an email at bcallow@wtfmushrooms.com. Happy to ship those out whenever you're ready. And again, congratulations, Jamie. So let's just kind of get into what we're working on. Again, it's heading into peak summer, and it's always challenging working on any kind of expansion, especially when you're trying to keep production levels going. And we definitely had a little dip in May last month. We were down, I think we were down about 400 pounds of mushrooms last month compared to the previous year, which is very significant for my business. A lot of that can be contributed to is we're trying to really prevent mold contamination this year. So we super pasteurize all of our substrate in these tanks, and the previous year we were using wood chips, and we were removing our bags out of these units every 2 days and sterilizing every 2 days, and the bags were still pretty hot. I wasn't really paying attention to temperatures back then, so I don't really know how hot I was removing these bags. But when I started realizing that there was a correlation between contamination and removing bags too hot, we started taking notice, and then we started removing the bags below 40 Celsius. So ideally around 95 Fahrenheit, which would be about 35 Celsius, is kind of the goal. And we just recently made a switch with our hammer mill, and now we're actually making our own sawdust on the farm. And now the bags are actually taking a lot longer to cool because there's more particles in the bag, and the sawdust really retains the heat. So these units, they're actually taking 4 days to cool down, which is really significant for my business. And we made the switch to sawdust end of April, and then all of our production that we've been working on, we've only been able to do in these tanks every 4 days. And then we are waiting on our new tanks to come from our manufacturer here in Summerland, and they took 2 months to work on some changes and get these into production, and these still aren't even quite done. This is very much a prototype design that we're working on, and we're just trialing it live on the farm and trying to make the best decision that we can moving forward so that these tanks work. And for the most part, they're great. We're actually using towels for the seal of the tank. So we're just actually wetting some towels, wrapping those around the edge, and putting a lid on. The only problem is that this lid is actually, it's shit. And we've only been using this for, I think, 2 weeks, and it's already starting to break apart, unfortunately. So I have some ideas that I've been talking to my guys on the farm here, and we're probably going to try Coroplast right now, and I'm thinking just a sheet of Coroplast and framing some 1x4 to press down. We've come up with these clamps, and we're just using ratchets. So we've just rigged up these clamps just right here, and basically we have 1x4s going underneath the tank, 1x4s on top of the tank, and then ratcheting with some strings to kind of compress the lid right down. And we just need something that's not going to melt. So I know Coroplast is going to work really well for this, and it's just whether or not we can get a tight seal. So I'm thinking I'd frame the edge with wood to kind of press down. There's some gaps in the tank, unfortunately. These tanks have a little bit of a lip right there, but as long as we fill it in with a towel, I think we can get these sealed pretty good. Another problem is these tanks are costing a ton of money right now. They're wasting a lot of propane because they're not insulated properly. Right now we're using concrete boards, and we're just putting those around the tank and then tarping it, and it's really not doing anything. They're getting up to temperature, they're working great, but we're wasting a lot of propane to get up to temperature. And my propane bill is through the roof right now, but it still is fine because we're trying to get more bags in rotation so that we can kind of catch up on production. But what we need to tweak right now is getting that propane bill down, so we're getting some proper insulation and getting a lid that's going to actually work for these tanks. And we have a couple other ideas. I'm going to go with the Coroplast right now, and I'll update you guys as all that develops. What's really important about these tanks is that they detach from our system, and we can add more tanks in series, and we can do more production with a smaller crew. That is what I'm really trying to do here is be able to maximize the output of what a 2-employee plus myself operation can do, and that's doing a lot of production kind of every day that ends up adding up to the volume of what we need for our greenhouses. So this is a design that we're working on right now. These tanks can get loaded with our tractor into our new lab. I'm going to bring you in there. We've been working on getting an old tractor working and kind of fixed up so that we can use it on our farm, and that's taken a couple months, so we're delayed on that as well. So right now we have to actually unload all of these tanks by hand. Huge time sink for us, but it's not a big deal right now because we're trying just to kind of get to that perfect situation. But you know, it's a lot of work for us. We've been working 50-60 hour weeks, and we're still trying to catch up because it's been so difficult trying to maintain the production level we need, but also work on the expansion that we're doing right now. And we are making a lot of progress. I'm going to bring you guys into our new lab. Right now we got a garage door installed here, and you can just lift this up by hand. We had the electrician in here today. We're just working on getting some lights installed here. We spent last weekend, I believe, and it took us 14 hours to get all these shelves up for what we need. And we ended up building these in sections, and we did the six shelves kind of on the ground, and we put the posts where we needed, and then we raised them up and just kind of secured them to the wall and secured them to the post. And you know, this went up a lot faster than it has in the past. In the past we've actually framed this out, and then I've had Clay, who's my skinniest employee on the farm, he'd actually crawl in the shelves and be stapling all of these 1x4s, and he'd be crawling in there and kind of getting it. Like we'd kind of go up and down and get to a point where he had to get in there, and it was a lot of work, and it took days to do. So the fact that we got this together on a Saturday, few pints of beer, 14 hours of hard work. King came down, who's my investor. He came down from Salmon Arm, and we just got this done. So I'm really grateful for King for helping me work on this. And for now, we're just going to be using this lab in here. It's dark in there, but that's where we have a 2 flow hood workbench. We're going to be using that, and when we can afford it, we're going to get a 3 flow hood workbench along this wall here, and then the new tanks are just going to get picked up with the tractor on the forks, set right here. They can just cool down in all this space right here, and then when we're unloading from the tanks, we're basically unloading to the workbench, inoculating, and then everything gets moved and put back on the shelves. So huge efficiency that we're missing on our farm right now that we're trying to correct, and all of that is taking a lot of time. This has been something I've been talking about on the channel for over the last year, and we're still working on getting this all finalized. I would say one of the biggest developments that we just kind of figured out this week is how do we get a profitable second flush on our king oyster blocks. Being in greenhouses outdoors, the mycelium tends to dry out, I think, a lot quicker than a typical indoor mushroom farm. And once the mycelium dries out, you need to rehydrate it, or you're not going to get mushrooms growing. And the problem is with king oysters, you cut the bag, cut the top completely off, and then you get pinning. And as these mushrooms mature, the mycelium dries out. And second flush is usually non-existent with my farm. And we've tried numerous things. We've tried flipping the bags over, we've tried rehydrating them with water, and none of this works. When we rehydrated the bags with water, I kind of hit it with the hose. We got lots of bacteria, lots of blotch growing in the bags. All the mushroom pins that I didn't harvest, they started rotting. And then when we flip over the bags, we might get some pinning starting, but it's kind of growing where you don't want to, and then the mushrooms don't usually mature the way you want. And then suddenly, I guess it was like a few days ago, I just kind of got this aha moment. And we thought, why don't we flip the bags upside down? So this is the top, and then we've made an air gap, and we've just initiated these like we normally do. We just cut like a little slit in the bag, and we're going to get pinning starting on the top of the bags. I don't know if I can find one just at random here somewhere. Probably not, because I didn't actually stage this video. But we're actually really hopeful, because what happens is the bags, as they're growing, the bottom actually stays quite moist, and we often see pinning on the bottom. So by flipping it and exposing that moist side for the second flush and adding a little bit of fresh air in the top, we should get a nice pin set for the second flush. That is the hope, and that way we can be making a little bit more money with our kings. The alternative is, if this method doesn't work, then we need to increase supplementation so that we just get a really good first flush, one and done, chuck them, and then just kind of reset the greenhouse. That's common with shiitake grows. We could definitely do that with king oysters, but for my farm, I'm trying to keep my production in the greenhouses for 6 to 8 weeks, and we're trying to get 2 flushes. That's always the goal. We do charge more for our king oysters, but getting a second flush is really how we're going to make really good money. That's our profit right there, is maximizing how much mushrooms we get per bag. So that would be one of the biggest developments that we're working on right now. We got really hot a few days ago, or not a few days ago, it was probably about 10 days ago, and we weren't really getting the cold shocks that we normally do at night. So we weren't getting any pinning for our king oysters. And then just recently, the temperatures dropped, and we're getting lots of pinning of our king oysters, and some of these blocks have been sitting in here for weeks. If you guys can see just an example there. And I don't know, there's probably another one right here as well. So everything's just starting to pin, so we've cut the tops off. And that's really important. If you're an indoor grow and you can regulate temperature, you can actually cold shock your blocks. We use the nights here to do that, and we live in a very desert climate, and the nights do drop quite a bit, and then they warm up throughout the day with the sun out. So we really do get that natural cold shock that some mushrooms really do need, and king oysters are definitely one of those. Another really cool thing that we've started noticing as we refine our process and we have less and less contamination is that certain wood-loving species don't really do well on sawdust spawn. And we made this switch last year. We started to do all of our mushroom production on sawdust spawn for second generation, and then now we get transferred to our final production blocks. And we've had really good success with, I would say, all of our oyster species and lion's mane. And we've just started noticing that our chestnut mushrooms and our pia pino mushrooms on the third expansion, they're contaminating. And this was becoming very evident as we are getting specific contamination with specific species. And I started reaching out to people like Eric from Cap and Stem, and he's actually the guy that I got the chestnut mushroom species from years ago. And it's something that I hadn't even been aware of, is that most growers don't like to grow on sawdust spawn. And the theory is that the mushroom has to work that much harder to colonize sawdust, and it colonizes grain a lot easier. And more aggressive strains, and lion's mane is a really fast, aggressive strain, and so are oyster mushrooms, they don't really get tired out, and they can consume sawdust. But strains that are more slow growing, like pia pino and chestnut, are great examples. I would assume like maitake and others would be other examples. And they get tired out by consuming the sawdust that they actually can't they can't prevent contamination. Like, they can't fend off contamination, and they contaminate a lot easier as a result. So we're starting to realize that we actually need to go back to grain spawn with specific species. And I'm working on a bunch of trials now. I actually am not allowed to put on this YouTube channel exactly what trials we're doing, but we're going to be using Ronald Shelf's method for grain spawn. I'm also playing around with TR Davis's method for grain spawn. Both of those guys are very secretive in the techniques that they use, so it's something I can't make public here. But needless to say, we're trying to work with grain spawn again in our pasteurization tanks, but also using our pressure cookers and seeing if we can use both processes and get great success. So we're going to be trying that with specific species moving forward. And I'll show you one bag of chestnut mushroom that's growing on sawdust right now. So this was actually grain expansion to sawdust for chestnut mushroom, and you can see the mycelium actually looks fantastic. And that's the thing, is we pick out perfect spawn and we expand it to our production blocks, and we were getting green and black mold, and it's not actually evident in the spawn bag. So this is something that is new research for us that we're trying to figure out with specific species. What is the best way to utilize our sawdust spawn that we love using on our farm, and what species we should focus more on grain spawn to overall prevent contamination. And finally, another big thing we've been struggling with is we had another occurrence of blotch on our farm, and we are experiencing that in about 3 different greenhouses in different successions, and we were getting blotch on the pins of the mushroom only on the first flush, and then it was disappearing after the first flush was gone, and then the second flush was fine. And we were basically throwing out blocks, or we were picking the blotch mushrooms and washing our hands with peroxide, and it was really stumping us until I kind of started thinking about what was going on. And we are fruiting a lot more mushrooms in our greenhouses now, and oyster mushrooms, they grow so quickly that the CO2 levels were spiking. The air was just getting dirty, and in the spring our fans don't actually run that often. They go on and off based on temperature and humidity, and if it's not too hot outside, the humidity in these greenhouses is going to maintain, and then our humidistat isn't going to turn the fan on, and we weren't getting enough fresh air kind of cycling through our greenhouses. So the solution for that was to open the back window there a little bit more, so that there's a lot more air passively going into our greenhouses, which was lowering the humidity, triggering the humidistat to turn the fans on, and we're getting a lot more fresh air in our greenhouses. This is something that we don't normally experience in peak summer because it's so hot out here that the fans continuously run, continuously add moisture through our misting fans, and there's so much fresh air in these greenhouses. So just something to note. It's sometimes you got to listen to the mushrooms, and you got to figure out kind of what's going on in your system, and you need to refine everything. And even someone like me who's been doing this for a very long time, as we scale up our business and start doing more production, sometimes that creates more problems, and then you got to kind of figure out what's going on and fix those things. So overall, this summer is starting to really kind of turn into something awesome. I'm really excited for all the projects we've been working on, and as this business develops, we continuously learn and develop something that is truly unique. And I'm still continuously learning, and the only way to do that is to kind of just get your hands dirty and figure out as the problems develop. That's the best way to learn, is by failing, and believe me, I've done a lot of failing to get here. And as long as you're not afraid to kind of have a few steps back, you're always going to be looking forward, and you're going to eventually be able to achieve something just like this. Anyways guys, hope you found this helpful. We'll catch you guys in the next video. I have been completely worn out from all of this, and it's very difficult for me to stay on top of doing all these vlogs and doing videos all the time. I will do my best to try to continue making videos on interesting subjects and kind of keeping you guys updated what's going on, because there literally is so much stuff happening here every week. And we are a little bit behind on production right now. We've only been doing about 60 pounds a week, and all that's going to start picking up. We're just waiting on greenhouse 3 here. We have lots of king oysters, we have lion's mane, more pearl oysters, same thing in greenhouse 4. We have that half full, and we're going to be filling that again in a couple days. Greenhouse 5 will start filling hopefully by the end of the week. We're getting more production and rotation, and the farm is really looking good for the summer. I got lots of spawn, and I have lots of students coming here to help out this year, so I'm really excited. This is going to be a real fun year for us. So stay tuned, guys. We'll see you in the next video.